It'd be nice to see some different type of films on TV, different movies, different episodes, different, you know, games, songs. If they can socially distance songs with green screens and do it with Windows and then edit it out like EastEnders, like they're doing their episodes, that'd be great. So why don't they put more things on lockdown? You would have thought Rockstar would bring more things out to make more money on lockdown, but they're not. Any other games company would just keep things going, which they are. Would we see more things in the future of stuff? We're going to be waiting a long time to just watch something great on TV. I mean, most of it's boring anyway. They could make more episodes of TV programs or films or movies people like. Social distancing in the pictures, Mega Bowl. There's just so many things that I'm thinking about, talking about what they could actually do, but everybody's different. We all think differently, so the world is a crazy place at the moment. And another thing, 12 people today have died in the UK of coronavirus, 108 new cases confirmed in the lab, plus 41,800 people deaths today. And US reporters talking about 100 migrants across the borders, UK. Fines up to £10,000 for a licence party. Apparently, they're talking about the UK. Not about sending their children back to school, but
a huge dent in their future life chances if they don't. In the letter, Gavin Williamson
why
says
should
there's
they
a
send the
far
children back with
greater risk
coronavirus?
to children's health and well-being if they
That's
don't
my
go
feet.
in. It comes as a new poll shows shrinking public support for the government's handling of the
My feety
coronavirus
feet.
crisis. Sky's political correspondent Rob Powell reports.
Back to school with a difference. Millions of pupils in England will return to the classroom on Tuesday. Ahead of that, the Education Secretary has penned an open letter to parents reassuring them schools are safe. Gavin Williamson writes, if a child is not in school, they stand to lose far more than just a few months of learning. It could well put a huge dent in their future life chances. So are parents on board? Families out on London's South Bank this weekend seemed cautiously positive.
It's got to happen. I'm not overly excited about the prospect of her being in a class with 30 children.
Class, yeah, this have 28 kids for class very small. How keep a distance?
But for many teachers, like Staffordshire head Sue Hannam, it's been a frustrating summer. She's followed government guidance and organised her pupils into self-contained bubbles, but she says preparation is only half the battle.
In a larger secondary school, your bubble could be in excess of 300 children. So imagine you have a COVID positive case in a larger bubble. There's then a whole job of work to do to work out who everybody's been in contact with, which teachers they've been in contact with.
Hundreds of migrants going into Besky being reduced after it was unavailable to move due to any
While
over.
pupils head back to schools, MPs will also return to Westminster on Tuesday after their summer break. For Conservatives, they'll be greeted with worrying-looking polling that hints at a fall in support for
So they go back on Tuesday, do they?
An opinion poll of 2,000 people published overnight found 47% of those asked now disapprove of the government's handling of the pandemic, compared to 31% that approve. Labour has also drawn level with the Conservatives, with both parties now claiming 40% of the vote share. One poll 4 years from a general election won't cause too many sleepless nights here, but with challenges from coronavirus to Brexit stacking up, the government's tough summer could well be followed by a difficult winter. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
A universities union is warning that campuses could become the new care homes of a generation if the government fails to support institutions to make them COVID safe. Universities will be welcoming back students to campuses within weeks and have assured students they've taken appropriate steps to keep them safe. Sky's Katerina Witowski reports.
Right now, this campus is quiet. But in a few weeks, term starts, and Sky News has been told that with the arrival of students comes a new COVID-19 danger. And this is the,
So the infection could go to the universities as well.
In the UK, of 1 million students cycling in and out of lockdown zones, of bubbles, of homes, into new cities where we are not tracking tracing those students. And we are seriously concerned that if the government and universities do not step in and discourage the mass migration of 1 million students, we could see universities becoming the care homes of any second wave of COVID-19.
It was always going to be difficult for universities to keep socially active students socially distanced, and the A-level results problems has made that even harder. With universities having to accept more students than they initially thought they would have to, it's created even more problems.
At the very least, the UCU wants routine COVID-19 testing for students, but really it wants plans to fully reopen campuses to be put on hold.
The students kind of arrive and during term time they're studying, but then also
Presental following University of Manchester talking about collapsing two stories, restaurants, Northern Ireland, Chinese.
Coming in for face-to-face teaching. There are some exceptions I can see.
Drivers, Lewis, physicians,
students might not have access to the
Skycom, News, Sky, Newscom, reporting, Sky, AB, Facebook, Twitter, Sky, top stories. Additional security, Gavin Williams has arranged parents to send their children back to school or risk putting a hug of dent their future life.
Remote learning isn't what this fresher wants.
I definitely feel upset about that. I mean, it will kind of ruin
US President Trump says the setting following continuing protest over shooting 29 years. Oh, black, then jobs blamed. 100.
Time with my friends, to network with people will be much easier in the physical sense. I think doing it online is not exactly a big loss. I believe that will only be for the first year, as long as there's not a second wave of the coronavirus. But again, like I said, if they did do that, I'll be very upset with that.
A Department for Education spokesperson has said the safety
A snapshot
and
polling showing Labour Party and Conservatives wouldn't both win around 40% of the votes. General elections was held tomorrow, while 47% said the votes disapproved of the government.
Including on face coverings.
Face coverings, COVID-19
freshers
pandemic.
have had it tough, with exams cancelled, grades remarked, and now this. Most universities will offer some lectures online, but even with that concession, there are concerns it's just too soon for so many to be moving so far. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News.
Let's take a look at the most recent coronavirus figures in the UK. And 12 more people have died in the UK within 28 days of testing positive for COVID-19. That brings the total number of deaths so far to 41,498. There have also been another 1,108 lab-confirmed cases of the virus. Also making the news this morning, one person has been shot dead late last night in Portland, Oregon, at the same time as Black Lives Matter protesters and President Donald Trump supporters clashed in the streets. Police say it was not yet clear if the shooting was linked to the fight which broke out as a caravan of about 600 vehicles was confronted by protesters in the city. It comes as President Trump announced he'll visit the city of Kenosha in Wisconsin on Tuesday.
Kenosha.
The city has seen days of unrest following the shooting of Jacob Blake by a police officer. The National Guard was deployed to the city last week, and there were further peaceful protests yesterday. Speaking at the protest, Jacob Blake's father had this message for the police.
My nature is to protect my son, to stand up for my son when he cannot stand up, to ask the police in this town what gave them the right to attempted murder on my child. What gave them the right to think that my son was an animal?
29 people have died following the collapse of a two-story restaurant in the northern Chinese province of Shanxi. Chinese authorities say another 28 people were injured when the building suddenly crumbled during a birthday celebration. There are calls now to reform the social care system into an insurance-based model. The Centre for Policy Studies says the state should provide a basic level to allow individuals to pay for what they want, while the state continues to provide for what they need. Former Work and Pension Secretary Damien Green told Sky News that the system needs to change before it reaches breaking point.
There will be more and more old people needing care in the future. So we will have to spend more money collectively on it. That's certainly true. But also, there are particularly the baby boomer generation that has got a lot of wealth in housing. A small sliver of that would enable them, as I say, to buy these supplementary insurance and get more money into the system, and at the same time would ensure that we didn't have to have a system that would mean that some people might have to sell their family homes to pay for social care.
And activists in Montreal have pulled down a statue of Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald. Sir John was linked to policies which killed many Indigenous people in the country during the 19th century. Quebec's head of government called it unacceptable. The Italian Coast Guard has launched an operation to rescue some of the more than 200 people stranded on a boat in the Mediterranean. One person is believed to have died on board the Louis Michel, a rescue boat funded by the street artist Banksy. The vessel's crew claim that the appeals for assistance were ignored.
Less than 29 people have died. 28 people have been injured following collapse of a two-story restaurant in the Northern Ireland, Chinese province.
Located in a nighttime operation. They were taken aboard the Louise Michel, a rescue vessel which found itself in trouble. After a series of operations in recent days, more than 200 people were left crammed onto the ship or in a lifeboat nearby. The vessel was effectively stranded, unable to move because of the sheer weight of numbers. Its crew say European nations ignored calls for help for hours.
It has been for a long time. It has been Italy who has been most responsive due to its geographical position.
Give this thing a like. Give it a like. Video. Want more likes, don't want more of these ones. No downs, but thumbs up. Thank you.
European borders.
The Louise Michel is funded by the British street artist Banksy and features some of his familiar art. He put out a strong video condemning the lack of response. His message adding to mounting criticism of the European Union's migration policy.
This is their responsibility, and people should not be dying at sea. People should be rescued immediately and disembarked in a safe port as soon as possible.
The Louise Michel was converted into a rescue vessel to help migrants and asylum seekers trying to reach Europe from Africa via Libya and the Mediterranean Sea. Dozens have lost their lives trying to make that dangerous journey. And the fate of those on board the vessel will present extra challenges for European governments. Michelle Clifford, Sky News.
New rules to prevent mass gatherings have come into force this weekend, with fines of up to £10,000 for anyone organising unlicensed parties. The measures are designed to restrict the spread of the coronavirus. Well, Sky's Ashna Haranag is in the newsroom for us now. So, Ashna, it appears not to be as busy as police forces were expecting it to be.
That's right, Vanessa. I mean, these sanctions that were brought in on Friday night are the toughest sanctions that we've seen so far. The Home Secretary put it tell when she brought in these new offences, these combating offences. She said that this would really be a clampdown, a crackdown, really, on people who were taking the mick when it came to social gathering restrictions. When those fines were introduced on Friday night,
new rules are provided
go about their daily business,
come into force up to 10,000 unless
across the nation too. So it does mean that as of Friday, let's take a look at what those fines look like. You can now be fined up to £10,000 for hosting an unlicensed event or a large gathering of more than 30 people. If you're found to be attending one, police can issue fines of £100, but that then doubles for each offence. West Midlands Police, interestingly though, has said they dealt with 90 reports from the public about possible breaches of restrictions so far this weekend, but they didn't have to use any of those enforcement powers. We've also heard from Essex Police, who said that they had managed to seize a large amount of music equipment, totaling around thousands of pounds. So in doing so, they managed to shut down a music event which was due to happen yesterday. Most of those incidents, though, that police forces nationally have been attending tended to be house parties rather than those big gatherings or illegal raves. But yesterday, in Trafalgar Square in London, the Metropolitan Police found themselves having to combat and coming up against protesters who were there protesting against coronavirus restrictions and vaccinations. The Met Police did manage to disperse that crowd, and they, in doing so, managed to arrest 2 men who were there. Their approach has always been to help encourage and educate the public in order for them to comply with these new measures that have been put in place. But with those increased patrols that the police did have going into this weekend, it was perhaps thought that the bank holiday weekend might be more tempting, so that they might have seen larger events taking place. But there are 2 things that might have put people off here. Either that people are listening to the government's message and avoiding having large gatherings of up to 30 people or more, or the other thing could be that the weather simply wasn't good enough.
That's now live from the newsroom. Thank you. Well, let's return to our top story now, and the government's call for parents to send children back to school when term starts. Well, joining me now from East Sussex is the former Conservative Education Secretary, Lord Baker. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So, the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, will have all his fingers crossed that parents will listen to him and send their children back. What's your prediction?
Well, I don't really think it matters what Boris says or Gavin Williamson says. The success of this week will depend upon the professionalism and skills of the teachers. They are going to make this work. I think they want to make it work. I think they want to get back teaching their students who they haven't seen for 6 months. And it's about time we said more encouraging things about that. And I'm very optimistic. I think it'll work. The schools I'm responsible for, the UTC, some were open last week, and they've opened very well. We have workshops as well, so distancing is so much of a problem there. But we're doing well. One thing that's interesting that I've discovered is that lots of 18-year-olds now are not getting apprenticeships, they're not getting jobs, and they're wondering what to do. And some have come back at 18 for an extra year to learn another skill. And I think this is something which the government should encourage, because the big problem that's going to face the government now is youth unemployment. It's going to be a tremendous crisis for the rest of this year.
You touched on some young people who, of course, are struggling. And, of course, those young people will also be looking at the Education Secretary and thinking, well, you didn't handle the A-level results very well. What do you think of Mr. Williamson's handling of the education sector during the pandemic?
Well, former education secretaries over criticise their predecessors. It's been a difficult task. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And there was a fiasco over the A-level results. I think one of the consequences, actually, is that if you've lost 6 months of education, it's very difficult to catch up in a year, particularly for disadvantaged children. 1 in 5 have had no association with the schools at all for 6 months. And they've lost the habit of learning. They've lost the habit of attending a school. And this is tremendously difficult in maths. If you don't do maths every week and do the sums regularly, you forget how to work out how to do a simultaneous equation in algebra, how to cope with calculus and trigonometry, how to do long division or multiplication. And there's a big catch-up over this next year, particularly difficult for disadvantaged children. And I think now, I see the papers today are speculating already that there will be no GCSEs and A-levels next year. It's about 50-50 chance at the moment, but I think it's going to be very difficult for disadvantaged children to catch up and be treated fairly in those exams next summer.
But has the U-turn undermined confidence in the education system?
Yes, I certainly think U-turns always do that. I think Margaret said, this lady is not returning. And I think that, in fact, the government should think very carefully before pontificating on things on which they really can't control. They've got to realise that the control now lies in the hands of the professional skills and abilities of teachers. They are going to make this work because they know how classrooms work. Neither Boris nor Gavin Williamson know how classrooms work. And this is going to last not just for a few weeks, it's likely to last for the whole of the year, short of a vaccine being discovered. And if a vaccine discovered will be spread widely over every nation by the end of next year. I think that's, I think we've got to realise we've got to live with this vaccine, this virus, rather longer than we thought. But one good thing is there's rumours today that there's a 2-minute test as to whether you've got it or not. Now, if that does exist, that is a tremendous relief to the whole country. Because as far as schools are concerned, you could test every teacher and every member of the kitchen staff, the ministry staff, every day as to whether they've got it. And that would protect them and also the students. And if someone has the virus in a school, you can test their children and their families very easily. And that'll take a lot of pressure off the whole system. That could be a breakthrough, a real breakthrough. That's really good news today for us all.
Where does the ultimate responsibility fall here? Mr. Williamson is at the top of the chain when it comes to the education system. Has his role become untenable?
Well, as I say, I'm not going to call for him to resign. That's for him to decide, for the government to decide. I think it's been a very difficult portfolio indeed, because education is having to face things they never faced before. If I'd been Education Secretary in March, I would not have closed the schools. The very last thing I would have done. Because once you close schools, you not only upset children's education, you upset their family arrangements, the possibility of the mother or father going out to work, you upset the teachers as well. And I would have kept them open. And if they were closed, I'd have certainly called them back in the last 2 weeks in July. Definitely. And they've then taken the exams, actually. And that would be a much better thing to have done, quite frankly, than what happened. But you can't rewrite history. We are where we are. And the great opportunity now lies in the schools opening, and this has got to be a week of success and rejoicing.
Let's look at higher education now, because, of course, universities' unions are saying that they're not confident about students coming back, and some of the language they've used is about students becoming the next care homes, basically, the sort of language that they're using. Is this something that resonates with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big problems in youth unemployment is there's going to be a lot of graduates underemployed and unemployed because they have not got technical skills that are needed in this day and age. They've had a general education. And in the past, there's always been a mass of middle-class professional managerial jobs which they could go into. But artificial intelligence has cut a swathe through those jobs, a tremendous swathe through them. And they're going to be hanging around. What are they going to do? And there's going to be a lot of resentment and annoyance. When that is known, it's going to be known fairly soon. Already that's existing. And so I think if youngsters go to universities, they should think very carefully what they're going to study. Is it going to lead to some employability at the end of the day or not? This is, again, a very big problem for everybody. I think there's been too much concentration on having to go to universities to get a degree, and that is somehow the pathway to success. But there are other pathways to success. Apprenticeships are a very big pathway to success. In the schools that I've been promoting, at university technical colleges, 30% have become apprentices. And do you know that apprentices at 18, a hired apprentice, as long as you've got one A level in maths and science and one BTEC extended diploma, companies will pay them over £20,000 a year at 18 with no degree. And in fact, the Navy will pay them £32,500, which is more than the graduate earnings after 3 years of university. And so there's all different opportunities to open up now. And we've got to realise that education is going to have to change to recognise that. I think universities will have to provide a lot of degree apprenticeship, That sort of thing. I think universities have got to change and make the value to the student is employability at the end of the day. That is really very, very important.
Lord Baker, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Enjoyed talking to you. Bye.
This is Sky News coming up. The Notting Hill Carnival, but not as you know it, Europe's biggest street party goes online.
Wow.
Nothing is
I hope you liked it, this video. Give it a like, give it a
story.
comment. This news channel thing. Thank you for joining me, and I shall catch you all in the next video. Peace.